Welcome to Living Clean, Living Well, everyone. I'm your host, Teresa Cruz. We're so glad to be back with you again on this Sunday night on CTS. Tonight we're going to be talking about the traumatic effects that can happen to us in life and how it can feed into addiction. Tonight you're going to meet a man who is one of Toronto's finest. For 25 years he served as a policeman, but all that frontline work took a toll, and unfortunately he was plunged into the crippling effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, into addiction, did some prison time, finally a turning point, and into recovery. It's a tremendous story, one that he wants to share, but most importantly, he wants to help. So please welcome back tonight, Gary Rubie. Gary, it's wonderful to see you again.
Thank you for having me back.
You betcha. And of course, our regular contributor, Dr. Vera Tarman, is in tonight, the Medical Director of Health for Renascent. Welcome back, Dr. Tarman.
Thank you. I'm always glad to be back.
Yeah, we're here to tackle the big subject of trauma in general, but post-traumatic stress and addiction. Your thoughts on the people that you have helped through this, when you see them, when they're fighting addiction, and the correlation between the two.
Well, I think it's a really good topic to be talking about because there's such a high overlap of post-traumatic stress and addiction. Usually what happens is that people suffer some sort of post-traumatic stress or trauma rather, and then don't know how to deal with it. The medical profession is not great with dealing with it, so they end up self-medicating and end up with trouble with substance abuse.
Gary, you were here a year ago, and you had just launched your book, Out on a Cliff.
I did.
Yes, so it was great to talk to him about his book, and he has something for you all later on tonight that we're going to be telling you about. But first of all, I would like to recap his story and what he's been through. Gary, let's start off. Where were you 3 years ago tonight?
Wow. 3 years ago tonight, I was on what I would probably safely call a 4-day suicide mission. I was looking to end my life, and I was caught in the throes of my addictions that had ignited, unfortunately, as a result of my post-traumatic stress disorder being re-triggered through a number of events that occurred through my inability to obtain a WSIB claim for my post-traumatic stress disorder. So,
and you had come under this from all your years, your 25 years of being a frontline worker.
Yes.
I cannot, as a person that doesn't do this, but you were a person that made our streets safe, and you looked after us when they weren't, and when terrible things happened. It's a very stressful job, isn't it?
Yes, very stressful. I mean, you know, you can compare policing to a number of different professions in the front line, and they're all very stressful. I mean, a soldier goes to war and he faces a lot of trauma in a very short period of time. A firefighter, or an ambulance attendant, doctors and nurses, any frontline responder, they're going to be dealing with traumatic events. And you know, unfortunately, we have to face these sorts of things, and they do take their toll. You know, my post-traumatic was cumulative. It was a result of all of the incidents that I had experienced in my career over a 25-year period, and unfortunately, they came to a head with certain areas of the profession that I dealt with in the later part of my career.
So it's just like it built up and built up and built up, and then finally you just couldn't take it
Yeah. Well, they said it was like a drip of water falling into a plugged-up bathtub, and it took one drip of water at the very end. My bathtub overflowed, so you know, my bubble burst. Yeah.
So, Dr. Tarman, when you're seeing people that are suffering with traumatic events, is it your experience to find that it's one big thing, or like Gary says, it's just that one extra thing that pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, it's interesting the way that you describe it. I've had the experience of having, like, I'm thinking of a few times firefighters who have to witness really awful things, like, you know, subway jumpings and people jumping off cliffs, or not, pardon me, buildings, which I can just imagine how horrible that would be. And they would say it was okay, but then it was the one time, you know, it was the little kid, it was the something that was just a little too close to home, got under their skin, and then they were toast. And I hadn't actually thought that it was like that accumulative little, I thought it was just the one time that they were, maybe their guard was down or something like that. But I've seen that experience happen, yeah.
So Gary, in order to help yourself cope, it was alcohol that you were dealing with then?
Yeah, I mean, anything that I could get my hands on. I was
Really?
self-medicating. Once I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, I was under the care of a psychiatrist, and this is post-treatment. I went to Homewood for, initially for addictions. I did a 4-week program in 2009, and then I was diagnosed with post-traumatic. I did an 8-week program immediately following that, and then I was under the care of a psychiatrist, and I was dealing with a lot of what other doctors would now say I was probably overprescribed Seroquel. I was taking 1,300 milligrams
Your thoughts on that, Dr. Tarman?
a day.
The Seroquel?
Well, 1,300 milligrams is an extraordinarily high amount, and I'm imagining it was a psychiatrist that prescribed it for
Yes.
you, because family doctors usually would be terrified to give that much. Usually we give 25, 50 milligrams, you know, and 300, 600 is considered pretty high. I'm surprised you didn't. Did you balloon out? Because it makes
Oh,
you
yeah.
gain a lot of weight.
Yeah, I gained about 50 pounds.
Yeah.
I was on 4 or 5 other medications at the same time.
Really?
But the Seroquel was the one that was, it was an antipsychotic, so it was
Yes.
many side effects to it. So when I was abusing alcohol, I was taking extra Seroquel.
On top of the 1,300?
On top of the
Wow.
1,300. I suffered through some injuries in my lifetime through sports and through my career, so I was abusing narcotic painkillers as well at the same time. So it was just really, whatever I could do, whatever I could take to escape from my reality, which was pure hell. Living on Earth was hell, and I just needed to get away. I had to get out.
You must have. Were you like zombie-like?
Oh, very catatonic.
Yeah.
Most days I would lose 8 to 10 to 12 hours staring out a window and just not moving. It was really a challenging time. You know.
So 3 years ago tonight, you're on a suicide mission. What was the turning point for you, Gary?
The evening of October 8th, I was arrested for the second time in 3 months and
That was
in 4 months.
DUI?
Yes. And I was incarcerated for 6 days. I wasn't able to make bail, and eventually I made bail, and I was...
So a cop in prison
Yeah.
for 6 days.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
yeah,
That
so I
must
was,
not have been very good for you.
No, it wasn't. It was probably the most disturbing time of my life. Yeah, and when I was released, I was placed under house arrest. You know, I had to stay with my parents, which was very humbling, for a week, and then I was placed in a treatment program again. And I was put in touch with a doctor who really, maybe unfairly, I credit him for saving my life, because he was probably the most influential person, caregiver, that I had dealt with in the 2 years that I was challenged with my active addiction and post-traumatic.
So we've seen the events. If you could share with us what was going on in your head when you realized, I am not living like this anymore.
Well, you know, I guess the first thing is that, you know, being a police officer, I think I always felt that I was invincible, because I had to have that bravado. I had this feeling that, you know, nothing was ever going to happen to me. And I worked a lot of undercover work in my years as well. So you always had to have a very high level of self-confidence, bordering on cockiness. But when I went to jail, there was nowhere to turn. Like, I realized at that moment, like, the only way out of this is to go through the front door, do my time, and go out the back door. And it was the hardest time of my life. I mean, when I finally was placed in treatment, and you know, I had you can call it an aha moment or a spiritual awakening, but my 3rd day in treatment, you know, I was kept in Homewood for the weekend, and that Friday night, you know, I don't know what's out there in the universe that's greater than me, but I believed that there's something bigger than me at that point, and I said, whatever you are, whoever you are, just help me. Like, I finally decided at that point that I wanted to live. And I woke up the next day, and I had visitors say to me, wow, you must have had medications changed. Your eyes look so clear, and you seem so bright and alert. And nothing had changed other than my attitude, you know, my perception of where I was and where I wanted to be. And it really was a journey from that day forward. I mean, it wasn't easy work. You know, I made a lot of changes in my personal life. I took a lot of people out of my life, even people in recovery that I had known in recovery, and friends from recovery that, you know, maybe in my opinion, or in others' opinions, weren't practicing a good recovery program. I knew what I had to surround myself with, and that was just solid, good recovery people. And I had to sit with a lot of pain, you know. I had to work through a lot of personal issues, and I had to deal with a lot of internal hatred and angers and resentments. And, you know, I was angry towards the police department, and I was angry towards WSIB, and I was angry towards individuals. And, you know, I realized very quickly that resentment is a poison pill for anybody in recovery. So, you know, once I was able to forgive all those people, the hardest thing I had to do was forgive myself. And when I forgave myself for all the things that I had done, you know, I realized that, you know, I wasn't a bad person, but I just did some bad things. You know, it was just unfortunate circumstances that led me through all those trying times. And, you know, there I was. I mean, I was able to sit with all that pain and able to come out the other side. And you know, I was encouraged by this Dr. Vedalego in Homewood to share my poetry and I call them short stories, but they're poetry, and to compile this into some order to put together for people to read, and it became my story of hope and redemption. So.
Well, we're going to take our first break here on Living Clean, Living Well, and before we do, all I can say is thank God you're sitting with us here tonight.
Thank you.
So, when we come back after this short break, we're going to have more of Gary's journey to recovery, some thoughts from Dr. Tarman as well, and how we cope with trauma and how it feeds into addiction. And of course, we're always here for your general questions as well. If it's not on topic tonight, but it is about addiction or substance abuse, please pick up the phone. We are always here for you, right? We're here. Yes. Dr. Tarman is in the house, as I always say, so we're here for those questions as well. So, a short break, but when we come back, more from Gary Rubie and Dr. Vera Tarman.
It's scary to think that you're going to live the rest of your life without drugs and alcohol when it's all you've depended on. But there is hope. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and treatment allowed me the chance to ask for the help that I needed in order to believe that I could live a sober life. I got the help and support that I needed, and even now that I've left, I still have that support there.
Tonight on the show, we're talking about trauma, traumatic effects that happen in life, how it feeds into addiction, and how you can get into recovery and deal with what's happened. We have Gary Rubie, who's been sharing some of his story. We've got a little bit more of it to go. And also Dr. Vera Tarman, medical director at Renascent, is in the house tonight. Just before we get started again, I just want to tell you the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness, who is the presenting sponsor of this show, is having its yearly gala, and this year's very special. It's its 20th anniversary, and what an event it's going to be. It's coming up tomorrow night, and I can tell you, we might have a few tickets left if you want to come. We've got our great crew, the Q107 morning crew. John Derringer will be there along with all of his great sidekicks, as he calls them. We've got Alan Frew from Glass Tiger. We've got Andrew Cole, who has put together an amazing song about bullying, which is also a form of abuse. We'll also have NHL legends there. We've got Walter Gretzky, the father of somebody very famous. We've got Kevin McGuire, formerly of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's also with the NHL alumni, Tom Fergus. We've got Rick Natras. Brad May is coming. So it's going to be just a great evening as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the CCAA and also make a stand against bullying and all forms of abuse. That's tomorrow night in Woodbridge, which is a suburb of Toronto, if you were wondering. For tickets, you can go to abusehurts.com. So tonight, as I mentioned, we're talking about trauma, but of course we're always available for your calls about anything at all, about addiction, substance abuse, whatever it is that you want to know about, and perhaps maybe we can help, maybe we can find the resources to help you. We are talking tonight to Gary Rubie, a frontline police worker for the past, well, he was in the force for 25 years, suffered the crippling effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, got into addiction, but now thankfully into a life of recovery. So Gary, you were mentioning that you were journaling and it was coming out in rhyme, you were saying. So you started writing poetry. Tell us about the evolution of this wonderful book.
Probably 13 years ago when I joined recovery initially, I was directed to do some journaling, and it was therapeutic, and it was a way of putting your feelings in black and white on paper, and it was very powerful to actually see what you've written, and as opposed to just saying it or thinking it. That sort of journey evolved, and in 2004, 2005, quite by chance, it just started to come out in rhyme. I don't know where it came from, it just did. So I have no formal training in poetry writing. It just was a way that I was able to put feelings and stories of my life on paper, and it just happened to come out in rhyme. Over the years, I compiled some 300 poems, short stories, all true stories of my life, and in 2010, when I was in Homewood under the care of Dr. Vitiligo, he said, you know, Gary, you should really put these in some kind of an order, because they really do help people, and they seem to be causing a real effect on people that are in recovery, and there's always such a powerful response when you share these. So, you know, I approached my father at the time, who was a hobby artist and retired machinist and skilled boat maker, and I said, Dad, would you consider doing all the drawings for these poems? And he figured it was, for my father, you know, very humble, old European fellow who really didn't understand policing. He didn't understand the addictions and the cross addictions and all the things that went with my PTSD, and it was just a way that he thought, well, this is something I can do with my son, and maybe I can help him in some way recover. And he's seen, as we move forward with, you know, each poem and each picture and illustration that he drew, we became closer and closer. So, you know, not only did I recover, and it helped me recover, and the journaling and putting the whole project of putting this together was beyond therapeutic. It really rebuilt and built a relationship between my father and myself that, you know, no one could ever break, you know, and it was probably the greatest gift out of all of it, you know, besides my recovery.
And you have a special offer for anybody that's watching tonight. You've got a free e-book download, right?
That's correct, yes.
That's so wonderful that you want to share this with everyone.
Yeah, you know, I just feel so powerfully strong about the fact that the book, it's been a challenge to get the book out there to people. And, you know, the easiest way for me to share this story with everyone is to say, you know, go to the website, and it's available as a PDF download right now, and you can put it on your iPhones. Eventually, I'm hoping to have it as an iBook as well. So, you know, it's going to be available really to anybody in the world that wants to read it. And if there's one poem, if there's one picture, if there's one story, if there's one word that I share in there that stops one person from using for one day, or helps somebody out of a depression, and you know, it gives them a little bit of hope that they don't have to end their lives. You know what, all the pain and hard work that I put in writing this book and putting it together with my dad, it would be worth it, you know,
That's
just to help one person. So, you know, that's the spirit behind it. And I have to say, I lost my father this year, so this is also, you know, something that's going to honor him too.
A tribute to Dad.
A real tribute to Dad, yeah. So I feel very strongly about that, and you know, I hope people take advantage of it.
So the website is www.outonacliff.com. And so go on there and you can get your free download if you would like your copy, e-form, on Out on a Cliff by Gary Rubie. So let's open up our toll-free lines. Let's go to line 1 right now. Mike is calling in from Etobicoke. Hi, Mike. You're live on our show. Go ahead. Have you got a question or a comment for Gary and Dr. Tarman?
Yeah. I had, 20 years ago, I'm out on a cliff, as that website you're talking about. 20 years ago, I had a schwannoma, which is a tumor, and C4, C5, and a fusion C4, C5, and a tendon transfer to my left arm. And it's just been a medication roller coaster, and I was left with chronic pain. And the reason I called was I just heard him talking about an antipsychotic. They put me on risperidone, and I don't know, like, it just seems like it's all a hit and miss. What happened was I was doing well on morphine, and then they switched me to, tolerance developed, and they put me on OxyContin and Percocet combined, and I blacked out. And when I blacked out, I don't remember going to the phone. I went to the phone, and anyways, the point being, I blacked out, and they cut me off, and so I ended up on methadone, and it's not great for pain. And then they're trying a high dose of gabapentin, and you know, there's I don't know. It seems like a mess, and I feel like I'm out on the cliff, as his website talks about.
So do you have a question for Dr. Tarman?
Pardon?
You were talking about you were saying that all of the drugs, it turned out to be a little bit of a mess and everything. Where are you right now?
I'm taking the medication. I'm living at home, but I mean, is that what you mean?
Yeah, Dr. Tarman, did you want to comment on Mike's journey so far? Is there anything different he could be doing?
I guess I'm not really sure what your question is. It sounds like you're not happy about being on the Risperdal, and that might be, you might have been put on that for sleep, because sometimes they do that instead of giving you another habit-forming drug like Ativan or lorazepam. But is it that you... The other thing about methadone is it is a pain it is a medication for pain, but you have to use it on a split level. Like you have to take it 2 or 3 times a day, because it doesn't last for 24 hours for pain management, and that might be what some of the problem is.
Yeah, you're right. You just mentioned that recently, to split the dose up, and they're using it on me for pain. But it, my pain, when I was on, my pain doesn't seem under control. When I was on the narcotics, I was in no pain, and now I'm suffering excruciating. I get burning feet, severe neck pain. They got me. They switched me from a high dose of lorazepam. I was put on it by a neurologist. They switched that to a low dose of clonazepam.
Right.
And it just seems like so many pills, and I don't like the road I'm going down. It's my pain. When I was on morphine, I was in no pain, and I keep telling them, put me back on the narcotics, because I wasn't suffering then. I was only on 2 medications. Now they got me on such a mishmash.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that they're nervous to give you, continue to give you opiates, so they're giving you the methadone instead. And then you're probably on other drugs like Lyrica or something like that, and then you're on the Seroquel. So I can appreciate, because all of those medications cause a lot of side effects. But you're kind of caught in a rock and a hard place situation, because I think that the doctors are probably nervous to give you the morphine on a regular, continuous basis.
You know, Mike, I want to say you're not alone, because over the course of many years, we have been hearing over and over again about pain management. And Gary, you were mentioning that was part of your road as well. You with the injuries that you had, and were you on oxys as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So in dealing with pain management is something that I think it's time for us to do a show on. In fact, I've got one in the works in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So Mike, stick with us, and I'm going to be having some experts on how they feel about how pain should be managed in a way where you don't end up with like the cocktails and various other things that you might be able to try. So Mike, thanks so much for reaching out to us tonight. Like I said, stick with our show, because I'm going to be doing a show specifically on pain management and how it can be sometimes affected by addiction, and how we can get out of addiction but still manage to deal with the pain.
I hope I get to be on that show. Am I on that show?
Absolutely. We'll check the sked. Let's go now to line 2, and Joey's calling in from Cambridge. Hi there, Joey. Welcome to our show tonight. You're talking with Gary and Dr. Tarman.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Gary and the doctor, it's not so much about pain medication, it's about alcoholism. And is it a spiritual remedy, or is it just physically get sober and then stay away from the medications? So I'm just struggling with that. I go to meetings, and I get help from other people. But I'm just wondering if you have any experience from a medical standpoint. I do read a book, and in that book there's a doctor's opinion, and that doctor mentions that it's physical, mental, and then also a spiritual malady. And I've been on the cliff like Gary too. Anyway, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Joey. Gary, do you want to respond?
Sure, yeah. I have to say that in my own personal experiences, that I had to find a power higher than myself. And once I was able to turn my will over to a higher power, and the human contact of 12-step recovery and being with other like-minded people was a huge part of my recovery. For many years, I tried to control my own addictions and moderate, or even trying to go on a taper and then just quit on my own free will, and I could never do it on my own free will. So I really believe that unless you're connected to something greater than yourself. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that pushes a Bible or God, and that's not what I'm saying. I just believe that there's a connection between other people who are struggling with addictions, like-minded people. Meetings are extremely important, you know, to have that physical contact, and then prayer and meditation. I mean, it works, and you can pray to whatever you want. I mean, a lamp post, a coffee cup, just say that it's bigger than you, and take yourself out of the equation. It's what's worked for me. So,
Dr. Tarman?
Yeah, well, you know, Joey, you read something that sounded like it came from the AA, the preamble or the beginning of that. But I want to say that, so it definitely, it's a 12-step program. It suggests that it's a physical, mental, and spiritual disease. But even the American Society of Addiction Medicine has adopted that framework. It is a mental, psychological, physical, and spiritual ailment. So even the doctors are on side now that it needs to be a spiritual. It's not enough to just look at the medical or the physical side. That will only get you in the door. It won't get you through recovery.
Thank you so much. Let's go now to line 4. Kim's calling in from Ottawa tonight. Hi, Kim. You're live on Living Clean, Living Well. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm currently in very early recovery. I'm only about 2 months in. And basically, I have a childhood history of sexual abuse. And so I was sexually abused days on end as a kid for years. And up until probably about a month ago, so a month into my recovery, the nightmares that I had during my addiction basically went away. And so I'm wondering, basically, does this, like, obviously it has something to do with my sobriety, but at the same time, like, is this something that's going to come back in terms of, like, the post-traumatic stress, like, later on down the road? Or not?
That's a good question. Dr. Tarman, do you want to tackle?
Yeah, well, there's two things I'd like to say. First of all, Kim, that you mentioned your childhood history of sexual abuse, and Gary, you've given an example of your experience as a police person and the cumulative experience. But you know, post-traumatic stress occurs to many people, not just in the frontline work. And your example, Kim, is a really good one. Just the many, many women and the many, many people who have had sexual abuse as children or in their relationships also constitute a huge bulk of post-traumatic stress. And then also you mentioned some of your symptoms, like the nightmares, but there's other symptoms as well. I'm not sure if we have time to get into that right now. But will they come back? It's quite possible. I'm not sure. I think maybe we should give it to you, and then I can address it later more.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Gary?
yeah, I mean, in recovery, I've been able to, you know, maintain a sobriety level, but in terms of my post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, it's something that I've been able to manage. I've been given tools to manage right now, but my understanding is that it'll never go away, and I accept that today. 3 years ago I didn't. 4 years ago I didn't when I was diagnosed. And I go through episodes now in my life where I can see them coming on, I can see them, I feel the night terrors, I know when they happen. Obviously I wake up in a sweat and I might be yelling or thrashing. I'm feeling agitated and tense, and I feel like I want to withdraw from people. I don't want to be around crowds. Hypervigilant. These things come back to me, but I know that because I've been through it now for a number of years, that I go through a period. Sometimes it only lasts a week, sometimes it lasts 2 months. And they're frustrating stretches to go through, but when I get through them, I know that when I come out the other side, that it's all good again. And you know, I think the key in unfortunately having those cross-addictive diagnoses is that I don't use, I don't drink, and when I come out the other side, you know, I'm still sober, and I feel a lot more whole than when I was, you know, 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So, yeah, just battle through it. Battle through it. It's tough. It's so tough, but, you know, you're worth it.
Kim, thanks so much, and I'm really glad that you're watching our show. You mentioned that you were very early in your recovery, and I hope that we can also be a tool in that toolbox of yours as you head into the road of recovery and many more months. So thanks so much for picking up that phone tonight. We're going to take another short break, but when we come back, more of your phone calls and more from our guests tonight, Gary Rubie and Dr. Vera Tarman. We'll be right back.
It's scary to think that you're going to live the rest of your life without drugs and alcohol when it's all you've depended on. But there is hope. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and treatment allowed me the chance to ask for the help that I needed in order to believe that I could live a sober life. I got the help and support that I needed, and even now that I've left, I still have that support there.
Hello, I'm Ellen Campbell, the CEO and founder of the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness. As a charity, we depend on viewers such as yourself to support the programs for First Nations, women and children, anti-bullying, and elder abuse. I invite you to visit our website, see what you can do to share. Any donation over $20 will receive a tax receipt. Thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Tarman is so well known within the addiction field with her work at the as medical director at Renascent. She also is quite a public speaker, and every time she does a talk, I keep telling her, let me know when the next ones are going to happen. You've got two coming up in the near future. Why don't you tell them about it?
Well, the first one that's coming up I'm not sure when it is.
October the 19th.
October the 19th. It's coming up on a Saturday morning at Ryerson, is a discussion about harm reduction and abstinence. Is there a divide? What are the issues in each camp? And is there a way that we can make a resolution so that, well, basically that's where are the commonalities and where are the differences? That's the first talk. And then the second one I'm going to be doing is actually a duo. That's on November the 23rd, also a Saturday. I'll be talking about food addiction in the morning and then the biology of spirituality in the afternoon.
Have you got both of these on your website? So
yes, both of them are on my website, addiction.unplugged.com.
Great.
Please check them out. The first one, the first one is free, open to the public.
That's wonderful, and that's being held at Ryerson University. So if you'd like to hear more from Dr. Tarman, there's your opportunity, and her website is, of course, www.addictionsunplugged.com. Back to what we're talking about tonight, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, how it can feed into addiction. We've got some more phone calls to get to, but before we do that, could you just quickly go through some of the effects, Dr. Tarman, of what people could be looking for if they think, maybe I've got PTSD?
Yeah, so PTSD, as we just discussed earlier, it can be caused because of some really traumatic events, like seeing something, or really traumatic, or a gradual cumulative effect of smaller events, but over time wear you down. And what ends up happening is that a person gets this condition, which Gary has described really nicely, where they have sort of episodes of startled response when there's a noise. They really have a big response. Difficulty sleeping, hypervigilant, like really watchful for their safety, panic attacks, intrusive thoughts, like you might be just sitting there and all of a sudden these thoughts are coming in, what if, those kinds of things, and which end up having the person become quite isolated, anxious, and depressed. So if you have any of that kind of experience, you might be having PTSD.
Thanks for clarifying that. Let's head back to our phone lines. Gary, you ready for some more calls?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to line 1, and Tom is calling in tonight from Ottawa. Hi, Tom. You're live on our show. Go ahead.
Good evening. First of all, I want to tell you that I've been watching your show for approximately 2 years now, and I find it very useful, very interesting, and almost the perfect way for me to end my Sunday. So thank you guys for being there on an ongoing basis.
Glad you found us, Tom. Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about 20 years ago. I was working in the long-term care environment, and I'd been in that environment for about 4 years, and I was not in a medical situation. I was in a recreation and volunteer. I was managing a program in a large facility. And I found that very frustrated because I couldn't make enough difference in the people's lives that we worked with because there just weren't enough people. And I find it exceedingly frustrating because I would see people that were amazing people, that were great people, and we just couldn't do enough to help because there just weren't the resources. And I found myself one day driving to work considering driving into a wall, an abutment. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. So I went to my family physician, and we went forward, and I got sent along to a psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me with dystemic disorder, I guess low-grade depression. But I was interested to know because my experiences were not unlike what the doctor described. It's sort of interesting. Is that the type of thing Gary felt? Is it sort of the ongoing sort of little hits, the old drop of water, and the frustration with not being able to do enough? Is that why this happens in part?
Very much, yes. I think in the end for me as well, Tom, that there was a time where I just felt so helpless that, and I'm going to tell you that I worked in the child pornography unit, and I worked as an online lure. So I engaged with pedophiles online and pretended that I was a young girl. And
so
it
that
became,
you could save so many.
Yeah, I mean, the most rewarding role I ever had in my 25 years of policing, and the most crippling and frustrating time I've ever spent in policing, because the volume and the amount of abused children was so staggering and overwhelming that I just felt like I could not make a difference. And I wanted to surrender. Like I could have cried every day. It was horrible. It's just a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really relate to that, and just having those experiences and not being able to help.
Yeah. From a medical point of view, Dr. Tarman?
Well, actually, what I want to say first, Tom, is I can so relate to your experience. That was my experience, too. When I started doing my medical work, I worked with older people. And I remember feeling exactly what you felt, that there is so much need here. And it's tragic. These are people who are, wonderful people who are reduced to this level of not only aging, but aging in a very decrepit environment, nursing homes, and there you want to help them, and you can't because there's just so much need and so little help available. Just as you talked about that, my heart went out to you. Just oh my God, I know what that's like. And yes, that kind of you're clearly somebody who wants to help, and not being able to, for sure, that's a drop. It's a drop in your soul, like in your soul, damaging soul. I'm not, anyway, just want to, I don't know if I have a medical response. I have a personal response. Yeah.
And also validation for how Tom is feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's strength in numbers, isn't there? When
Yes.
you know that you're not the only one, and that you've got your feelings validated, It's a real tough one. And I also want to say, from Gary, your work with the child pornography unit, I know through my volunteer work at the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness, Toronto set the standard, and Toronto really went out there and is really showing the world how they can protect our most precious resource, which is our children. So I really commend you for that work that you did, because, like I said, your work has gone on to save so many others, and thank goodness you were saved too, because of what went on. So,
can I say one more thing quickly? You mentioned this something that the frontline workers like police and Tom. Thank you for bringing that up, because there's also like the frontline workers like physicians and nurses who also have to deal with the miniature drops in the bucket of having to see people and see horrific things. So, just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go now to line 2. Lisa's calling in from Oshawa. Lisa, thank you so much for your patience. You've been waiting a little bit. It's your turn now. You're talking to Gary and Dr. Tarman. Go ahead. Lisa, you still there? Well, let's move on. Lisa, we're going to try to reach you again, and if unfortunately we've severed the connection, please call us back. Let's go now to line 3, and Henry's calling in from Quebec tonight. Hello there, Henry. Welcome to our show. Henry, are you there? I just have to remind everybody, if you are going to call in tonight and you're waiting to talk to us, you're unable to watch the television and also talk to us on the show because there is a delay. So, Henry, if you can hear me, I'm going to call out to you one more time. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Terrific, yep. Henry. Please turn down the TV and go ahead. You're talking to Gary and Dr. Tarman.
Oh, good evening. Yeah, I'm calling from Hull. I'm a recovering addict. I've just about died twice. I just came out of a medical detox after 10 days. And even after almost dying, I was right back at it. And I just sort of I did my own detox there, so it's been about a week. But I was a nursing, well, an RN, an RPN back in those days, 15 years. I worked in a nursing home, and I've got sexual abuse issues. And recently, the last 2 times I almost died, I've had lots of years of sobriety, in and out. I've been to 7 rehab centers, detox. I've NA member for 20 years. You name it, I've tried everything. I've just been diagnosed with depression or severe depression, anxiety. But they're talking about PTS and other things. Like they put me on Cipralex and Seroquel, and the Seroquel gave me bad dreams, and the Cipralex made me suicidal. So, you know, where do I go? Like, where do I go? What's the process for diagnosis or where do I go to get some deeper help for like my my depression? I spent 14 days in bed. Yeah. Drinking 20-some beers a day and didn't eat a thing. So.
Okay, Henry, let's let Dr. Tarman weigh in on this. Go ahead.
Well, Henry, I want to say, first of all, that you're in really early recovery, and there isn't any antidepressant that's going to help right now because withdrawal is just really unpleasant. And one of the major side effects, one of the major features of withdrawal is depression. Antidepressants might help a little bit, but you're just going to have to sit through those 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, which is why you don't want to do a self-detox. You don't want to do this alone. So, I mean, the good news is if you can hang in there and stay sober, just by nature of your body recovering itself, in about 3 months' time, you'll feel better without meds. And if you're on meds, that'll just speed up the process. But you're going to have to sit through this period. Just a lot of medications I'm not sure how much that's going to help. Just don't do it alone. Go to a rehab.
That's great advice. We're going to take another short break here on Living Clean, Living Well, but when we come back, more of your phone calls. You are waiting. We're going to get to you. Living Clean, Living Well returns right after this.
It's scary to think that you're going to live the rest of your life without drugs and alcohol when it's all you've depended on. But there is hope. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and treatment allowed me the chance to ask for the help that I needed in order to believe that I could live a sober life. I got the help and support that I needed, and even now that I've left, I still have that support there.
Hello, I'm Ellen Campbell, the CEO and founder of the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness. As a charity, we depend on viewers such as yourself to support the programs for First Nations, women and children, anti-bullying, and elder abuse. I invite you to visit our website, see what you can do to share. Any donation over $20 will receive a tax receipt. Thank you so much for all your support.
Statistics state that it is likely you know a victim of abuse. It could be a friend, a relative, a colleague. It could even be you. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before they reach the age of 18. Please give them hope. Help us make it stop. Go to abusehurts.com and give to the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness.
We're back. Let's go back to our phone lines. Right now we are talking with Gary Rubie, who is He's suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. He was a frontline policeman, if you've just joined us. This is part of his story, and he went into addiction but has come through with recovery, and he's sharing his story tonight and also with you. And of course, our regular contributor, Dr. Vera Tarman, is our guest. So let's head back to the phone lines. Let's go to line 4, and Ernie's calling in from Port Hope tonight. Hi, Ernie. Thanks for your patience. You're live on our show. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, Gary, I've been living well actually now for about 25 years. Much of my sobriety, I went through the same things you went through, where forgiveness of others came first, and I did have a revelation to me that was very real, and I'm sure that God opened my eyes to show me the kind of person that I was at that time, and being raised all through life. There was abuse that was involved. I went through 3 different reform schools, and he revealed to me my true self, and I can remember looking up and saying, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And from that day on, my life changed. And about a year later, after treatment and going to a lot of meetings and getting a good sponsor, I found out that the key was to forgive myself and move on, much the same as your circumstances were. And I did move on, and life wasn't really all that much better when I was sober. It was, what I call a dry drunk until I found spirituality, and I had to find, the God of my understanding to make my life, let's say a little easier, or where I did find my freedom. But my dilemma now is that I retired at 55, and I went out with a younger lady. She was out of recovery at the time. I knew absolutely nothing about drugs, and we did start dating, and she enjoyed the fact that I wasn't a drug user or a drinker, and one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was involved with a crackhead. And during this time, she got pregnant, and she had a child. I am now raising that child on my own. I'm still trying to have our daughter share in her life, but she only shows up 4 or 5 times a year. There's broken promises. I listened to Dr. Phil, and he said he could tell when a crack addict was lying, and he said when their lips move. And that seems to be the case here. But I don't want to plant seeds of hatred or...
So, Ernie, is your question on how best you can help your daughter?
Well, it's actually how it can help me, too, because I'm at the point now where Gary had mentioned where he was in child pornography for all that time, and he felt helpless. And this is the way I feel right now with Bella's mother. I feel helpless, yet I don't want her to lose the love of her mother. And even when she does show up, I ask her to be clean, but she's not clean, and it's broken promises. And she's now 3 years of age. She's a beautiful little girl. I do get lots of help from my family, and I attend the Northumberland Child Development Center here, where I got to learn to be a mother and a father. And it's difficult raising it now, but I'm sure the Lord's given me this. I don't know. My family, He's put me on this route for good reason. Number one, I had to write my ex-wife a letter of apology because I couldn't realize she raised 2 children virtually on her own. I was a workaholic and an alcoholic, so I always thought I was the breadwinner. But it's given me a great understanding of just, how difficult it is for any single parent to raise a child.
Of course. So listen, Ernie, I'm just going to have to jump in here because we do have to get to other phone calls. My deepest apologies, but we only have so much time. So Ernie, from what I understand from you is that you said you're looking for help for yourself and help for your daughter as you deal with somebody that is so horribly addicted. Panelists, who would like to start off first?
Well, let me just say, Ernie, that it sounds to me like you have already got help. You're just you're not really sure what to do, though. But it sounds, I mean, you're in a situation where there's not really a lot you can do. You're getting help as it is, but you're in a rock and a hard place situation. If you can forgive the mother, which it sounds like actually you have, then it's a matter of just now protecting yourself and the little girl from this repeated broken promises situation, and how best you can protect yourself, because really that's what it's about. You forgive her, the mother, but now take care of yourself. That's what I'd say. Do you want to add to something?
Just, I think you sound like you've been in recovery for 25 years, and you've got a really solid foundation. I think back to basics is, you know, what we were all taught in the beginning is that we can't control anybody except ourselves. And, you know, as long as you're being the best person you can be for your child, that's all that anybody can ask.
Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, Ernie, for calling in. We've got about 7 minutes. Let's get to the rest of our phone calls. Line 1, Jeanette's calling in from London tonight. Hi, Jeanette, go ahead. You're live with Gary and Dr. Tarman. Jeanette, are you there? Jeanette, I'm sorry, we've lost connection with you too. And we're going to try again. My director's just telling me, I think, Jeanette, we've got you. Are you there, dear?
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, hon. You're live on the show.
Oh, hello. I watch your show all the time. I love it.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
And Gary, I'm very sorry to hear about your father.
Thank you.
But I'm really glad you had that time to spend with him to get to know him and to write your book. I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. I can't hear you.
We're not saying anything. We're listening. So go ahead, Jeanette.
Okay, sorry. I'm bipolar and I have PTSD. Now, the bipolar was easy enough to live with. The PTSD just took it right over the edge. It is so horrible. And it seems like nobody really gets it or knows what to do with it.
Dr. Tarman is nodding, and I'm hearing her. Your thoughts on bipolar and PTSD?
Well, I don't know. That's even a bigger question. What I want to say is that you're right. There's very little that we can do, or we know what to do with post-traumatic stress. There are various treatments like EMDR or cognitive therapy to try to deal with it, but it's a pretty hard animal to manage. Gary, do you want to say something?
Therapeutically or from a medical standpoint, I can't comment, but you know, all I can say, and I empathize, is that you know, for those who don't have PTSD, there's no explanation, and for those who do, no explanation is required. You know, you understand, and I understand. I feel your pain, Jeanette. I don't know really what advice to give you other than you just have to soldier through it. You're going to go through those battles, and you know, hang on. Just hang on. It's worth living for.
Jeanette, I hope you were watching earlier in the show when I told you that Gary is doing a free download of his book, so an e-book. It's available to you, and maybe that might bring you some solace as well. You can go onto his website at www.outonacliff.com, and there is a free download waiting for you there. Thank you for calling in. Let's go now to line 2. Michelle, I'm glad we've got to you. Michelle's calling in from Oshawa tonight. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Terrific. Go ahead, Michelle. Gary and Dr. Tarman and myself, we're all listening.
Hello?
Hi, go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering if it's possible to have post-traumatic stress without doing medications, either to make yourself sleep or to control, you know, the anxiety attacks that you have, or just in general control it yourself.
That's a great question. Can you control it yourself without any medical intervention, with the medicines and things like that?
I'm sorry, I'm confused though. Are you saying you want to do it without medication or with medication?
Without medication.
Oh, I see. Yes, I do think it's possible, but I do think it's really important that you don't try to do this yourself. because you're operating from a sort of fear place, a panic place, and you need somebody who's going to help you sort of see the forest while you're in the trees, and give you tools. And in there are various tools, like I mentioned, EMDR, which is a classic trauma therapy type of tool, or there's cognitive therapy, there's other types of, and then there's group support. You want to, I actually really strongly advise group support, because usually people in trauma situations are filled with a lot of shame, and being in a group helps you lift out of that shame.
Good
so,
point.
I don't know, I'm sure
Gary,
you have
what do you think?
something to
Not
add.
from a medical point of view, of course, but you know, would you soldier through this without medicine? Would you ever try something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every situation is very unique, and in terms of how I was diagnosed and in the severity of my PTSD, I've had 4 different psychiatrists and 2 other practitioners that are very strongly in favor of me remaining on the medications that I'm on currently, and it's a very low dosage, but it helps manage what I'm doing. There's a lot of things that I do by myself to manage those things. There's all kinds of breathing exercises, and I do a lot of meditation. I started practicing yoga. You know, these sorts of things are really important, you know, to help me inside of my own head, because it's a bad place for me to go, is in my own head, and when I'm there by myself, it's dangerous. So, you know, the doctor spoke about doing this with a group and in a practiced facility if it's possible, and if you're going to try to do it alone, I wish you the best, yeah.
Gary, I'm curious, with your journey, there's so many things that you have to deal with on your own, and yet you're so willing to help other people, and I'm curious if in some way is that helping you in your recovery, or is it just something deep in your heart that you know you need to do?
You know, it's hard to really put a finger on it. I think I always had that as a young child. I probably had it as a young adult. It's why I joined the police department.
I was going to say, like the profession that you went into, yeah.
I chose to be a helper, and you know, I heard, of all people, I heard Don Cherry say once, if you talk about volunteer work, it's not volunteer work. You know, so there's a sense of humility that goes with that. But, you know, I've always felt that it was important to give back that way in terms of volunteering and being parts of committees. So, yeah, you know, it's a good place to be.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad you were able to share with our viewers tonight as we tackle a very difficult subject, really, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then, of course, how it feeds into addictions. We are going to come back just shortly after the break with my panelists' final thoughts on this evening, and they'll be telling you what you can look forward to in the weeks ahead right here on Living Clean, Living Well. So our final break, and we'll be right back after this.
It's scary to think that you're going to live the rest of your life without drugs and alcohol when it's all you've depended on. But there is hope. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and treatment allowed me the chance to ask for the help that I needed in order to believe that I could live a sober life. I got the help and support that I needed, and even now that I've left, I still have that support there.
It's that time of night when we ask for final thoughts. Dr. Tarman?
Yes, okay. Post-traumatic stress. Don't try to do it on your own. And by the way, you're not alone, especially if you're suffering with addiction, because they are really highly overlapped.
And Gary, your thoughts as we talk about your journey and where you've been and where you're going?
Strength in numbers. Don't do this alone. That's the key, like the doctor said. It's so important to, you know, align yourself with another group of people that are dealing with the same thing, because there's a lot of strength in being together, you know, that you're not soldiering on by yourself. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I really hope that you come back and visit us again.
I would like that.
I get so much strength and admiration when I hear your story, Gary. Thank you. And if you would like to learn more about Gary's story, he's got it in his book, Out on a Cliff, a collection of his poems and his short stories about his journey towards recovery, with all the beautiful illustrations done by his beloved father. And you can get your free copy, an e-download, on his website. We've got it up there for you right now, www.outonacliff.com. Coming up in weeks to come, we've got shows on pain management and also on anxiety as well. Dr. Tarman will return as well. We'll see you next